All right, welcome. Today we're taking apart an Alienware M15. This is the newer M15 with the RTX 2060, and it's got the i7 9th gen. And we will be using a small Phillips bit. This is a 2.5 to take apart most of the laptop. We are going to be leaving the display assembly complete, but if you need to open it up, the bezel just pops off. There's a little bit of adhesive around the perimeter, but should be pretty easy to take apart. Okay, so we're going to take out all of the Phillips head screws around the perimeter and also the screws on the back here. Alright, once you get those screws removed, or in the case the front screws just loosen because they're retained in the back, you're just going to take a spudger and work it into the seam here between the bottom case and the palm rest. I already went around and popped this one out, so you just basically need to use one hand to keep tension and then just work those little snaps all the way around. And then you should be able to lift off that bottom case. Alright, quick look inside. Upgrades look really easy. You got your battery connector. RAM sticks are easy to get to. Your hard drive caddy with the connector is easy to get to. Your two SSD slots, easy to get to. Your fans, heatsink, DC jack look all pretty easy to remove. So that's definitely a good thing. So we will start by just removing those RAM sticks. Then generally, removing the battery is a good idea to start out with. But in this case, just doing the RAM sticks doesn't really matter that much. So with this connector, it looks like they have a handy little loop to just grab and pull straight up on. And then we can remove those battery screws. Looks like maybe just those 4. And then we can lift the battery out of the case. And this is a Type 1 F22N. Okay, so we'll kind of repeat the process for the hard drive connector. Just pull straight up on it. I like to kind of support the board right there with my finger, just a habit. And then we can remove those hard drive caddy screws. Okay, and then looks like there's a little bit of adhesive on the bottom. And then to remove your hard drive from the caddy, just hit those 4 screws. Alright, so now we will remove the screw for the SSD. And just pull it out of the slot, and these are NVMe 2280 size SSDs. There's a slot for 2 of them. Okay, so we'll go ahead and also remove the Wi-Fi card. Remove the screw for the little antenna keeper. And I'm just going to pull straight up on those antennas to pop them off that Wi-Fi card. Pull it out of the slot. All right, looks like next up we're gonna do the fan and heatsink assembly. So just so we don't forget, I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the fans first. So you can either use your fingernail or a spudger to get those little tabs, and it just pulls straight out of this little connector there. Just a little 5-pin connector. Okay, so I'm going to go along and remove all these heatsink screws, remove or loosen. Alright, now that we have those heatsink screws out, we're just going to kind of lift up and wiggle a little bit. Depending on how old the thermal paste is, it can sometimes act as a pretty strong adhesive. So we're just going to give it a gentle wiggle, and this will also help us figure out if there's any screws left. I did leave the 2 screws that are just holding the fans to the heatsink. If you want to replace the fan itself, you just undo that last screw. Man, that is a lot of thermal paste. I'm going to say this one was actually replaced at some point in this computer, because I don't usually see manufacturers using that much paste. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we're going to start undoing some of the brackets and ribbons that are connected to this motherboard. So we'll start over here. So it looks like for this in-out board connector, they do have a little bar retainer here, so you gotta flip that up and over, and you can kind of use it to pull that connector out. Okay, and then we are going to want to free the CMOS battery there, so we can go ahead and finish removing the in-out board here and put it off to the side, and then this just pops up and off with some adhesive. Little plastic strip from the palm rest, and now we have the CMOS battery free, so when we go to remove the motherboard, we don't have to fight with it. Okay, so we'll go do the DC jack as well, remove the bracket. So they've also used some tape to kind of stick it to the motherboard, so I'm going to free the jack side first and then pull up on that tape and see if I can get fingernails on that connector enough to pull it out. So back and forth motion does help. You can get that long connector out of there for the DC jack. Okay, so I'll continue removing the ribbons connected to the motherboard here. Same type of connector as the in-out board. You gotta pull up on the plastic, then pull up on the little bar, and then slide that connector out. All right, touchpad and looks like maybe the keyboard backlight. Just flip up on the retainer, remove the ribbon, and then push it back down. And the one for the keyboard is on the back side. Looks like we got another one for the speaker. We'll just get our fingernails on that and pull it out. Alright, so looks like we got the ribbons that are still connected, and now we will remove the motherboard screws. Alright, looks like we just got the one more in the middle. And then we can take one side of that motherboard, lift it up a little bit, and wiggle it back and forth just to make sure we've got all the screws out. Okay, so once I pull that bracket off, it looks like there's another tiny little rib in here next to the USB-C port. So that's why it's good to just give it a small wiggle instead of trying to remove it right away, because sometimes these little ribbons and just a little bit of a pull on them will rip them. Okay, and then we will turn it over slowly, make sure there's nothing else attached to the bottom. And it looks like we are good. So that is how you remove the motherboard. Alright, so taking a closer look, the touchpad is replaceable, just a few Phillips head screws. Keyboard also looks replaceable. These are a smaller Phillips bit, I would say like a 1 or 1.5. So you'll need a small Phillips to remove all the keyboard screws. Ones for the touchpad are a little bigger. But now we are going to go ahead and remove the display assembly from the palm rest. And depending, it did look like before we removed the motherboard that these screws were accessible, so you probably won't have to remove the motherboard first. That's just the order we went in. But the main thing is, if you need to replace your display assembly, just make sure that these two ribbons and these two antennas are free and disconnected from the motherboard, and that you can get to these hinge screws, and that these hinges will have enough space to clear. As long as you have made it that way, then you should be able to pull the display assembly maybe soon after removing that bottom case. Alright, so remove those hinge screws, and then you can separate the display assembly. And as I stated, there's we're going to leave this one complete, but you basically just have to pop off this little front surround bezel, and it does have some kind of rubbery butyl-like adhesive, so you may need some kind of way to reattach the bezel. It does click into with some little catches, but this should be a pretty easy display assembly to take apart. And you just get your fingernail underneath one of the edges and then work your way around, popping it off. Okay, so for the last thing we're going to do on this one, we're going to pull up this large amount of black plastic and remove that power button. Pull those three screws, and then the power button also kind of stuck to something, or the power button ribbon, so just make sure you pull that up, and then you can remove your little power button. So that is it for the palm rest. It looks like the speakers are just held on with some rubber grommets, so you won't even need a screwdriver for those. That is it. That is how you take apart a Dell Alienware M15 with the RTX 2060 video. And if this video helped you or you found it informative, please like and subscribe. Thank you.